Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are going straight to the heart of, well, a titan of sound, Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. When you hear his name, I mean, you probably think soaring melodies, right? The drama of Swan Lake, maybe the festive brilliance of the Knucker.
Absolutely. Those are the big ones.
But if you peel back the layers of that really vibrant public music, you find a man whose life was fundamentally defined by a kind of silence.
A silence. How so?
A silence so profound and frankly terrifying, it was almost too much for his soul to bear. It's quite a story.
Right, and that's what we're diving into today, isn't it? That tension, the thing that created that almost heart-wrenching sound in his compositions.
Exactly.
So for you, the listener, think of this as a shortcut to understanding that his music wasn't just, divine inspiration out of nowhere. It was a psychological pressure release valve.
A pressure release valve, I like that. We're examining the profound internal conflict, the forbidden affections he harbored, and the absolute, almost suffocating weight of 19th century Russian society that really molded every note he wrote.
It really did. You can't separate the man from the time or the music.
No, you can't. His scores were never just notes on a page, were they? They were the vessel for a sorrow and, well, a clandestine love that society simply forbade him to even acknowledge, let alone express.
A love that dared not speak its name, as they say.
Precisely. So, our mission today is to synthesize the raw agony of his personal life, which lets us understand the essential context for his greatest works. We're looking deep into the composer's soul, a vast emotional canvas, but one tragically obscured by the era he lived in.
And to really appreciate the depth of his crisis, we have to set the stage, don't we? We need to understand that rigid scaffolding of 19th century Russian society.
It wasn't flexible.
Not at all. This was an era where expectations, especially for an intellectual, a public figure of Tchaikovsky's stature, were incredibly inflexible. Public life demanded order, tradition, propriety.
And this wasn't just like social preference, right?
Yeah.
It ran deeper.
Oh, much deeper. It was rooted in the powerful influence of the Orthodox Church, the aristocratic structure. It all dictated that a respectable life, the only acceptable life really, required marriage, family, and strict adherence to conservative moral codes. Anything else was unthinkable.
So that societal expectation created this immense, almost unbearable pressure cooker for him.
Exactly. A pressure cooker is a good way to put it.
And what's really crucial to grasp, I think, is the internal current running beneath that highly polished, successful surface that everyone saw.
Yes, because outwardly he was becoming quite famous.
Right, but beneath the recognized genius ran this clandestine current, a kind of magnetic pull towards affections that were deemed entirely unspeakable by his world.
Unspeakable and dangerous.
Our sources make it really clear. He desperately sought a facade of normalcy. He wanted a conventional life, or at least the appearance of one, hoping it would deflect the world's piercing, judgmental gaze.
He was trapped, absolutely trapped, trying to find some fragile peace in just imitating normalcy, even though you can tell his most authentic spirit, his core being, recoiled from the very idea of conformity.
He needed to hide.
He needed to hide, and the only way he felt he could hide was to appear to belong, and this desperate need to conform that really drives the narrative we're exploring today.
Okay, so let's trace the arc of this struggle then. It's quite a journey. We'll follow him from this moment of, frankly, tragic self-delusion and utterly disastrous marriage to what we now see as his final, ultimate musical confession.
A journey that transformed his private agony into the public transcendent art we still celebrate today. It's quite incredible, really.
It really is. Okay, so here's where it gets really intense and tragically destructive. We have to start with the year that's just etched in the history of his personal torment. 1877.
1877.
The Crucible. Yeah, the Crucible. That's the word. A moment everything just exploded with the ill-fated marriage to Antonina Miliukova. She was a former student, wasn't she?
That's right. A former student whose admiration for him was, well, fervent is one word for it, bordering on obsessive, perhaps, and maybe terribly naive about the reality of the man she was pursuing.
And the motivation behind his decision, Tchaikovsky's decision, that's the most tragic part, isn't it?
It really is. Because it was a choice born not of any kind of romantic love he knew, he absolutely knew that was impossible with her, but of this profound, paralyzing loneliness and, frankly, desperation.
Desperation to fit in?
Desperation to fit in, desperation to quell the rumors, desperation for some kind of societal anchor. Tchaikovsky himself acknowledged later that he was trying to achieve an impossible erasure of self. That's a powerful phrase.
Wow, an impossible erasure of self. He was grasping for a lifeline then. believing that by adopting the conventional path husband-family man, he might somehow reorder the very landscape of his heart onto a path the world would finally deem righteous and acceptable.
A path that wasn't his own, but one he felt forced onto.
And that gamble, it wasn't just unsuccessful, it failed instantly, catastrophically.
Oh, immediately. The sources describe the vows as barely uttered before they became these immediate searing shackles. We aren't just talking about an unhappy sort of distant marriage here. This was a psychological abyss.
An abyss.
Yes, an abyss into which Tchaikovsky plunged with terrifying speed.
So the illusion just disintegrated.
Absolutely. The source material really emphasizes how it shattered almost instantly. It revealed a prison of his own making, not the sanctuary he'd maybe fantasized about.
And Miliukova herself.
Her presence became almost immediately an unbearable torment for him. The intimacy, or even just the expectation of intimacy, was horrific. He later wrote about these few weeks, just a few weeks, feeling like an eternity of waking nightmares.
An eternity of waking nightmares. That's chilling.
It is. And his refuge, his vibrant world of imagination, his music, the place he usually escaped to, it offered no escape now. None at all from the suffocating, inescapable reality of his marital bed.
And the mental toll must have been immense.
Immediate and devastating. He didn't just sort of, amicably separate. He fled, completely shattered, first escaping to his brother's home, then eventually getting out of the country altogether to Switzerland.
He really fled the country.
Yes. He was teetering on the brink of what was a genuine and recognized mental collapse. The psychological pressure had simply become physically and mentally unsustainable.
So what did people see? The public, I mean.
Well, if we look at the immediate social fallout, the public saw a spectacular humiliation, a failed marriage, a famous composer disappearing.
Yeah.
It was scandalous.
But for Tchaikovsky himself?
Oh, the internal devastation was far more profound. The failure wasn't just a disappointment or embarrassment, it confirmed his deepest fears about himself. He felt the searing brand of an unassailable truth, the confirmation of his inherent difference.
Of otherness.
Exactly, his otherness. It forced him to finally confront the unyielding landscape of his own heart and the profound, almost unbearable alienation that defined his existence. Outside of that approved societal structure, he just couldn't fit into.
So the marriage was this public performance he just couldn't sustain.
Precisely.
And its collapse left him face to face with the hidden truth he had desperately tried to deny.
The truth that would ultimately become the emotional engine, really, for his greatest compositions. It's a grim irony.
Yeah, so this is where the story pivots, doesn't it? From trauma, perhaps, towards transcendence.
I think that's a good way to put it. The confrontation with his own truth, however painful, brought forth the nature of the love he could feel. A depth of emotion that, inherently transcended gender as society defined it.
His soul was simply drawn to other souls.
Exactly. Irrespective of the stringent, frankly arbitrary boundaries erected by the puritanical world around him. The disaster of 1877, in a way, forced him out of denial and into a life lived, however secretly, more on his own terms.
And this is where we find that hidden river you mentioned earlier, the secret spring for his music.
That's it. Because this affection, this deep love, couldn't be expressed publicly, it had to find an outlet in sound. It became this hidden river flowing through him.
A love that dared not speak its name.
Right. Shrouded in guilt because of society's condemnation, absolutely. Yet at the same time, burning with this incandescent light that ultimately gave meaning and, I think, unparalleled emotional resonance to his existence and his art.
And in this hidden emotional landscape, there was one figure who really emerged as an anchor, right? Someone who stabilized his world.
Yes, absolutely crucial. His beloved nephew, Vladimir Davydov, Bob, as Tchaikovsky affectionately called him.
Bob Davydov. Not just family, then.
Oh, much more than just family. He was truly the anchor to Tchaikovsky's, storm-tossed soul, a gentle confidant, and the recipient of an affection so powerful and deep that the composer himself would later write quite explicitly in his private correspondence that he considered Davydov the greatest love of my life.
The greatest love of my life. That is an incredibly powerful, defining statement, especially given the context. The constant self-censure Tchaikovsky lived under.
It really is. Their bond seems to have been one of exquisite tenderness, woven from shared moments of quiet understanding and, importantly, unspoken empathy. It entirely defied the conventional definitions of the world around them.
It must have provided him with solace, acceptance, Things he couldn't find elsewhere?
Exactly. It offered him a safe emotional home, which was desperately needed.
Well, what's fascinating here, thinking about it, is the sheer necessity of that relationship for his creative output.
Oh, absolutely. For a sensitive, emotionally raw genius like Tchaikovsky, finding that one safe harbor, one soul who understood the inherent difference and offered unconditional acceptance, that can genuinely be the difference between psychological collapse and artistic creation.
So Davydov provided that essential emotional stability.
I believe so, yes. Particularly during the genesis of his late, great masterpieces. He wasn't just a muse in the traditional sense, he was existential support. Life support, almost.
And we know the depth of this affection, not just from, biographical hearsay or speculation, but from Tchaikovsky's own hand.
That's right. We have to delve into the letters. They've become a crucial and frankly quite controversial part of his historical record.
Controversial because they were suppressed for so long.
Exactly. But what they reveal, now that we have more access, is a man utterly consumed by this affection for Davydov.
What do they say? What kind of language does he use?
Well, his letters speak of profound, sometimes agonizing longing,
Yeah.
of yearning, of a boundless tenderness that also clearly aches with the knowledge of its own impossibility and, well, its danger in that society.
So joy mixed with pain.
Constantly. Tchaikovsky describes moments with Davydov as absolute joy, sheer happiness, but they also highlight this constant source of existential pain because that relationship had to be so heavily veiled, so hidden from the outside world.
And we have those specific undeniable declarations too, quoted directly from his correspondence. Things like, "You are dearer to me than all the world."
Yes. And when a composer known for his emotional restraint in public life commits that kind of sentiment to paper, knowing the incredible risks involved if it were discovered, it signifies a heart irrevocably given. There's no ambiguity there.
Yet at the same time, you see the struggle in those letters too.
Oh, absolutely. The simultaneous, devastating struggle is right there on the page. Tchaikovsky constantly grappled with overwhelming internal guilt instilled by his upbringing, his society, his religion. The fear of public exposure was immense. The crushing weight of public opinion was always there.
So this clandestine love, nurtured in the shadows, that was the real crucible.
I think so. That was the crucible where his deepest emotions were forged. And somehow, miraculously, he transformed that raw struggle into the transcendent art that we still celebrate today. He had to funnel his entire emotional life into his work because it had almost no other acceptable outlet.
Which brings us then to this period of history that actively tried to silence that truth. The censorship.
Right. The Iron Curtain of Soviet ideology, you could call it. For decades, much of this intimate confession, these clear statements in his letters, was systematically obscured, deliberately hidden.
Why? What was the motivation?
The Soviet era was determined to sanitize and, frankly, erase these inconvenient truths about Tchaikovsky's personal life. They needed him to fit a specific mold.
A mold of what? A national hero?
Precisely. The motivation was deeply ideological. They required Tchaikovsky, the great Russian national hero, to be this figure of unquestionable moral purity, tradition, societal virtue, fitting the rigid conservative narrative of the state.
So admitting that the composer of Eugene Onegin in the 1812 overture was defined by affections deemed forbidden was just impossible for them.
Completely impossible within the Soviet system. It didn't fit the required image of the heroic, untroubled genius they wanted to project.
So how did they actually achieve this historical revisionism? What were the specific acts of censorship?
Well, it was pretty meticulous and pervasive. Historians were, let's say, strongly discouraged, implicitly or sometimes explicitly, from exploring the full scope of his personal reality.
And the letters themselves.
The letters weren't just summarized selectively, they were actively redacted. Passages that explicitly detailed his emotional dependence or his deep affection for men, particularly Davydov, were literally excised from published editions, cut out, or sometimes deliberately mistranslated to dilute the intensity of the feeling.
So they changed the wording.
Yes. Soften it, make it seem more platonic, less passionate. Davydov, for instance, was carefully reframed. He became merely a distant relative or perhaps a patron in some accounts, anything to diminish the undeniable emotional weight of their connection.
Even though Tchaikovsky dedicated his final, most profound work to him.
Exactly. Even despite that incredibly significant dedication, it's a chilling demonstration, really, of how easily historical truth can be manipulated to fit a political or societal agenda.
They wanted the grand symphonies, the patriotic music.
But they wanted to deny the anguish and the true nature of the love that produced them. It took decades, really decades, of painstaking work by later scholars, notably Alexander Poznansky, who worked outside the Soviet system to gain access to the original, uncensored manuscripts and correspondence and finally begin to restore the truth.
But the music itself, could they censor that?
Well, that's the beauty of artistic defiance, isn't it? Even the most draconian censorship, the most determined revisionism, could not truly silence the music itself.
That's the enduring truth we hold on to.
Absolutely. The notes, the harmonies, those grand sweeping arcs in his symphonies and ballets, they carried within them the indelible imprint of his heart's secret language. It was a love that persisted, vibrant and defiant, encoded right there in the scores themselves.
Beyond the reach of any censor.
Beyond the reach of any earthly authority or historical revision, the music speaks its own truth.
And that encoding, that musical truth, brings us directly to his ultimate testament, doesn't it? The final monumental utterance of his life. Symphony No. 6 in B minor.
The Pathétique, yes. By the time he wrote this, you get the sense the shadows were lengthening for him. There was this palpable feeling of an impending farewell starting to envelop him.
Like an artist's uncanny prescience, knowing his time was short.
Something like that. He seemed to realize that the culmination of his life's joys, his sorrows, his triumphs, and all his agonizing struggles demanded one last, profound confession. It became this absolute imperative for him, it seems, to pour every last drop of his essence into a symphony.
A symphony that would serve as his most vulnerable, most potent, and ultimately his most public testament to a life lived constantly on the fringes of societal acceptance.
Exactly. And so we have the Symphony No. 6, the Pathétique. It stands as his profound, searing final confession.
And we know, because of the evidence we've just discussed, the letters, the relationship that it was dedicated to Vladimir Bob Davydov.
Yes, and that dedication is absolutely key. It's not trivial. It turns the work from potentially abstract music into a definitive, deeply personal, emotional letter addressed to the man he loved the most.
So to really understand this work, you have to trace that deliberate arc of suffering and maybe eventual resignation that's embedded right within it.
You do. Tchaikovsky constructed the Pathétique not as a traditional four-movement symphony ending in triumph, but as this deeply personal narrative of despair and fate. It breaks the mold.
Okay, let's unpack the movements then.
Right.
Starting with that incredible opening. Doesn't exactly burst out, does it?
No, quite the opposite. It begins with a whisper, almost a subterranean moan. That primordial bassoon opening, emerging literally out of the depths of the lowest register. It sets a tone of deep melancholy, introspection. It's almost overwhelming from the first note.
And that leads into the main part of the first movement.
Yes, the adagio, which then transitions into the main allegro non troppo. It's slow, tender, brooding at first. Tchaikovsky introduces two main themes here. One is quite tender, lyrical perhaps, representing the solace, the love he found with Davydov, and the other is this highly turbulent, explosive section.
Right, those explosive sections.
Yeah.
They really sound like the turbulent storms of the soul, don't they? The crushing despairs, the existential fight against his fate, maybe against the expectations of his world.
It's a relentless, powerful depiction of conflict, a massive emotional struggle played out right there in the orchestra. As a listener, you are immediately submerged in the anxiety, the tension that must have defined so much of his life.
And after all that intensity, that conflict, what comes next?
Well, Tchaikovsky then offers us this moment of, I'd say, deceptive grace in the second movement. It's labeled Allegro con grazia, a waltz.
A waltz, so lightness, conformity, maybe.
Traditionally, yes, a waltz implies that. But this waltz is immediately and fundamentally off-kilter. Something's not quite right.
How so? What makes it off-kilter?
Because it's written in 54 time.
54. Which is very unusual for a waltz.
Extremely unusual. For anyone listening who isn't steeped in music theory, a standard waltz has 3 beats per measure, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It gives you that perfect, predictable, flowing feel.
The 54 meter throws you off balance. It's 5 beats.
Right.
Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Exactly. Often felt as 3 plus 2 or 2 plus 3. That irregular rhythm is just a stunning symbol of Tchaikovsky's existence, I think. It sounds elegant, it's beautifully orchestrated, but it's fundamentally unsettling. It walks with a limp.
It can never quite settle into the expected, conventional, comfortable rhythm of society.
Precisely. It's the sound of someone trying desperately to dance the societal dance, but constantly stumbling, constantly feeling awkward because they simply cannot fit the required mold. It's a beautiful but utterly heartbreaking musical self-portrait of alienation.
Wow. Okay. Then we arrive at the third movement, the Allegro molto vivace. This one feels completely different.
Completely different. It's this blazing scherzo that builds and builds into a grand triumphant march. It's powerful, it's energetic.
The audience who first heard this, they must have thought this was the finale, right?
Yeah.
The traditional, heroic, conquering, close to the symphony.
Almost certainly. It has all the hallmarks. It is the ultimate expression of the public facade. It's dazzling, it's loud, brilliantly orchestrated the sound of overwhelming, undeniable success.
It's the sound of the famous, celebrated Tchaikovsky.
Exactly. Momentarily offering this sense of triumph over all the previous anguish and conflict. It's the public celebration he was expected to deliver. But, as you said, it's not the true ending.
It's a false climax.
A brilliant, deliberate, dramatic misdirection. He builds you up to this peak of conventional symphonic triumph.
Only to pull the rug out from under the listener. Because instead of ending with that expected triumphant march, Tchaikovsky ends with the sheer agony of the final movement. The Adagio Lamentoso.
And this is where the Pathétique truly becomes unique and utterly devastating, and where it fully achieves its meaning, I think, as a sonic autobiography.
The final movement is slow.
Very slow. Slow, dark, profoundly mournful. It is a slow descent into yearning, deep melancholy, and finally, this ultimate heartbreaking acceptance of fate. The emotional narrative doesn't conclude with victory or defiance. It concludes with resignation, fading away.
And the instrumentation must be key here, too. How does he create that sound?
Oh, it's critical. He uses the lowest strings, often muted, giving them this hollow, somber quality. There are no brass fanfares, no triumphant sounds, just muffled horns, dark woodwinds, and the thematic material itself focuses heavily on these descending scale motifs notes going downwards.
Which in musical language often symbolizes what?
Yeah.
Letting go. Falling.
Letting go, falling, sighing, even death. It is just a profound public statement of private despair laid bare for everyone to hear.
The structure itself is a statement then, ending slow and quiet.
Absolutely. Symphonies were meant to end big, with celebration, uplift, maybe a triumphant major key. Tchaikovsky chose deliberately to end his final major work, fading into complete darkness, almost disappearing into the orchestra's lowest registers. It just evaporates.
It embodies the full spectrum of his experience then.
I think it does. The vibrant joys he found in secret, those illicit loves, the unyielding loneliness, and maybe even the quiet dignity of his chosen yet incredibly painful path. He used his art, his music to validate his own heart when the world absolutely would not.
And we can't ignore the chilling timing of its premiere.
No, you can't. The first performance of the Pathétique took place just 9 days before Tchaikovsky's sudden death in October 1893.
9 days.
9 days. His life was extinguished far too soon, and those final fading chords of the Adagio Lamentoso, they remain this incredibly poignant echo of that premature ending. It's almost as if he composed his own requiem.
And left it behind for the man he dedicated it to, for Bob Davydov.
Precisely. And, it's important to at least acknowledge the controversy surrounding his death, too. While the official cause was recorded as cholera,
Which was plausible in St. Petersburg at the time.
it was plausible, yes. But the suddenness, the specific circumstances, they fueled this long-standing speculation, though. Let's be clear. The sources provide no definitive confirmation that perhaps the immense stress of his hidden life, the constant fear of exposure, or maybe even some kind of forced confrontation related to his identity played a role in his premature demise.
So the cause remains debated, but the pressure is undeniable.
Exactly. Regardless of the immediate specific cause of death, the relentless, crushing pressure of the life he was forced to live is undeniably encapsulated in the music he left behind, especially in the Pathétique.
So bringing this all together, what does this mean for us listening today? What's the core lesson here, distilled from these sources?
Well, I think it's that true genius, or maybe just profound human expression, often springs from the crucible of intense human experience. Specifically, perhaps, from that tension between the self we present to the world and the self we truly are inside.
Tchaikovsky's struggle, his hidden love, his magnificent pain, it all converged.
It converged to create music that speaks directly to the deepest, most private parts of our own souls, doesn't it? It echoes our own silent battles, our own hidden feelings, perhaps.
His authenticity, then, even though it was lived so covertly, and even though it was later censored, that's what gifted us this legacy.
I believe so. That authenticity gifted humanity with an immortal legacy of beauty, yes, but also empathy and raw, unflinching truth. His music endures. It's a testament to the enduring power of love, in all its forms, to somehow transcend societal judgment, to transcend historical denial.
The story of Tchaikovsky really is a powerful reminder, isn't it? That our silent battles, the things we hide, are often the unexpected source of our greatest power, our deepest art,
He took what was deemed forbidden, what could have destroyed him utterly.
and transformed it into something immortal, something universally relatable. That profound vulnerability exposed in the music is surely why the Pathétique still moves us so deeply today. It feels intensely personal even now.
It does, and perhaps this raises an important question for you, the listener, something to mull over long after this deep dive is complete.
Okay, what's the final thought?
Tchaikovsky found his ultimate, most powerful voice by embracing, through his art at least, a painful truth denied by his world. He used art as his confession, his validation.
So the question for us is,
What profound and transcendent art, or maybe just truth, might be waiting for release within your own life if we today lowered the boundaries between our authentic selves and the expectations, the pressures of our own time?